Welcome viewers once again to 15 Minutes Inside WACSI. Today we have a wonderful guest, a renowned activist who works in West Africa to push the boundaries and ensure that injustice is curbed across the region. Welcome on board.
Thank you for having me. My name is Farida Bemba Nabourema. I am from Togo. And I'm an activist, like you said. I've been advocating for social justice, the establishment of democracy in my country, Togo, the end of dictatorship both in Togo and outside of Togo, everywhere else in Africa where people are oppressed by a tyrannical regime. So I call myself a democracy and human rights activist.
A democracy and human rights activist. Interesting appellation, and we are going to be talking to this democracy and human rights activist to get her impression of activism across West Africa and possibly some lessons that we can learn to improve activism and ensure that activism contributes to give us, the citizens, the better dividends, that we want across the region. And when we talk about activism, what comes to mind is the Arab Spring of 2011 that inspired other Africans, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, to believe in themselves that as a people they can come together, push boundaries and send away dictators. And we can talk about the case of Burkina Faso, for example. But from your stance as an activist, a frontline activist, how do you assess the state of activism across Africa?
It is bad. Actually, I think it is terribly bad for so many reasons. Unfortunately, I will say that Africans were more active to fight for their freedom and their liberty a few decades ago than we see today. I have known activists from many other generations who fought for our independence and then were fighting against neocolonialism. People strongly believe in ideals and they give a lot of themselves to invest into fighting for those ideals. Unfortunately, the consequences were very harsh onto many. The new generation has developed a form of apathy and disbelief in the possibility of change. People don't see the political struggle as being worth it anymore. It doesn't mean they don't want their situation to change, but they don't feel like it is worth making the sacrifices that others made in the past anymore, because they don't see the result of those sacrifices. And unfortunately, our oppressors are only growing tougher, even though you can see that in many countries some of the strong men have fallen. We have in the majority of African countries today a semblance of democracy, where simply because every 4 or 5 years they have elections, and luckily every 5 or 10 years they have a new president, people are satisfied and then they qualify as a democracy, when inside of the country people have no freedom of expression or movement. People cannot speak their minds, they are afraid of repercussion, people cannot organize freely around their ideals. So you cannot really call that a democracy. It's even more difficult today than it has been many decades ago.
Listening to you, it gives me a sense of worry, because I was like happy that we have the Yenamas, we have the La Lucha in the DRC, we have you, of course, in Togo and across West Africa, we have Manjo BBC from Cameroon, who has unfortunately been arrested. But when you say the state of activism in Africa is bad, can you enumerate some of the challenges that you as an activist and your colleagues, in this field face when it comes to doing your work?
The very good thing about what we have today is that technology allows us to reach areas that we wouldn't have been able to reach in the past, and then it also allows us to connect with struggles and people across the continent. As a result, it is easier to identify citizens' movement across the continent. You can talk about the Ballet Citoyen in Burkina Faso, you can talk about La Lucha, like you mentioned, in the DRC and Mali in Senegal and many other places. But such movements have existed in the past. It's not the first. Like in Togo, we talk about Togo Debout or Formas Go, but then some decades ago in Togo, we had the M5 movement that really brought the first type of democracy in Togo in terms of us obtaining multi-partyism. The youth went out and they fought, and thousands died, but they fought till the end, and they brought multipartyism in Togo. So it is not a new phenomenon, just that it is documented better, and then it's more amplified. As a result, you see it as being more present. But then the level of commitment of these organizations and then these movements are not the same as we used to see in the past. Unfortunately, for a lot of citizens movements on the continent today, you have the drive and you have a lot of people who are passionate and want to be involved. But for some small elite and a minority, for some it is a money milking project, for some it's a fame project. For some, it is just for them to push for an individual that they believe in to become president. And when that individual comes in and replicates the same things they were denouncing with the former regime, they go mute and they go silent. So the struggle doesn't really end in removing one guy from power. The struggle goes beyond and is all about empowering citizens so that they make sure that they can hold accountable their leaders. And unfortunately, citizens' movements are being weakened at that level by tools and resources that our leaders are developing on a daily basis to kind of like curtains these movements. I am not going to be all pessimistic and say that the picture is all black or dark, because I see that there's still a very strong commitment for freedom all over the continent, and the youth want their life to be better. But it's all about convincing them that they have to be willing to make certain sacrifices for that life to become better.
We have to make sacrifices for our lives to become better. That is a subtle call, for all Africans to join the activism space. If I hear that, that's quite good. And working as activists, you are within the broader space of civil society, and within civil society there are other entities, traditional civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, and associations in other countries, if you want to call it that way. How do you appreciate your relationship as activists with these other actors within the civil society space on the continent?
I believe that everybody's involvement matters, everybody's engagement matters, everybody is important in terms of them getting involved for a cause. Because when you look at the amount of people who are fighting for a cause, whether they're fighting for climate change or gender equality or for children's rights or the rights of persons with disabilities, or for rights to access to water or electricity or education, or whether they're fighting against tyranny and dictatorship, the amount of people who are fighting is not even 1% of those who are doing nothing. So I don't like wasting my energy into criticizing those who are already doing something, in trying to kind of like school them and determine how well they should be doing what they are doing. There are a lot of people who have critics saying that, okay, these groups are just wasting time, and these ones, their struggles is just a waste of energy. Those who struggle is a waste of energy are those who are struggling with apathy, and who needs people to come and convince them that they have to rise. They are the one wasting our resources and wasting our energy, because the time that I have to go and convince a Togolese that his situation is critical enough for him to be mad and do something about it, I would rather use that time into fighting the regime directly. So I like focusing more on those who are still waiting to be convinced that something has to be done. I kind of like, it took me a long time to acknowledge the title of an activist. And I started using it more to reflect a different type of what an activist is supposed to be, because when you say you're an activist, it comes with a lot of cliche, and in some communities you're castigated and seen as a crazy person or a dangerous person that people shouldn't associate with. Then I'm like, okay, then I'm going to wear the robe of an activist. But I genuinely believe that every human being is supposed to be an activist, because an activist is just somebody who believes in justice. And if you're a human being and you don't believe in justice, you don't believe that your entourage, your people, your community should not live in dignity, then what are you living for? So every human being must and should be an activist. We should all aspire to believe in something that is stronger than ourselves, that goes beyond ourselves, and we must be able to commit some time to rectifying this. And it doesn't take so much. I had some friends who said, you know what, this your activism thing, I really don't have time for it because I have my career, I have school. If not, I would have been involved. And I said, if you have just 5 minutes a day to focus on working on something to be better, that already makes you an activist. And I'm sure you have at least 5 minutes in the 24 hours you have. So when you combine those 5 minutes to the whole week, at least you're going to have 30 minutes to sacrifice for a struggle. And you cannot tell me you don't have that, because I know you spend more time watching TV, or more time sleeping, or more time chatting on WhatsApp. So it is all a matter of having a will and understanding that when you are a human being, you have to leave a legacy, and that legacy is to make the world better than the way you found it. And if all of us are aware of that responsibility, things will be moving faster.
It's quite interesting you bring to the fore the elements of passion in activism, and it makes me to think of two cases, which I'll just share one at a time. And if we take the DRC, you know, today, fortunately, they have Felix Tshisekedi, and his pronouncement, you know, sound progressive, you know, for now. And, you know, that can come up as an encouragement, you know, to drive the passion for activists in the DRC to continue the work they've been doing. But if you take the case of Cameroon, you know, activists, they come up to say we want roads to be tarred, we want the education system for Anglophones or the Anglo-Saxon education system to be respected and sustained, yet they are locked up and their case is not being tried for them at least to be sentenced, or justice is not prevailing. In such closed systems whereby there is forceful repression, yet there are people with a burning desire to commit or dedicate 5 minutes a day, you know, towards that cause of promoting or pushing for their freedoms, and they don't see it coming up in the near future. You know, what words do you have for such activists or would-be activists in these very repressive countries or regimes, you know, to get them to stand up and push and hopefully get something better?
I said when you're going to Togo, like when you're going to Cameroon, Cameroon is very far. Togo is a very closer example. Like Togo, my country has been ruled by the same family for 52 years. And yes, for the average Togolese, the ideal thing to do in situations like this is to just give up and be like, we have been in this mess for so long, then how are we going to pull ourselves out? This is just going to be a waste of time. I have always perceived my activism as being something that I myself as an individual will not benefit from. The people who fought for our independence, that sacrificed their life for their independence, none of them lived past 20 years after this independence. The majority even died in the first 2-3 years of that independence, but they did it for us. And we have a citizenship today thanks to them. And the sacrifices that they made cannot be minimized. And they fought a struggle at a time where they had nothing and no resources. I remember in my grandfather's time, they would walk from their village to town to attend what they call meetings for independence. And that was like almost 400 kilometers. And they'll do it back and forth. They had no money, they had no cell phones, they had no electricity, they had no resources. And they were running all the risks that come with that. And they'll be arrested sometimes, put in prison, spend over a year in prison. When they come out, they go back to the struggle. They were not doing it because they expected that they would become Togolese citizens and would be enjoying all the money and the resources of Togo. They were doing it because their children are not born indigenous like them. They are not born second-class citizens, and then they want to leave a legacy. So when you want to involve yourself in a struggle, you must always understand that whatever little freedom you have today, no matter how little it is, whatever little space that you have today, no matter how uncomfortable it is, whatever country you have today, no matter how unclean or dirty or difficult things are in your country, some people had it worse. And you are actually enjoying the fruit of their labor. So Togo may not be a great country in terms of freedom and liberties and even wealth, but I am proud to be Togolese, and I am proud for Togo to be what it is today because my grandparents fought for it. And hadn't been done, maybe I would still be farming somewhere by force for a French owner. So we have to understand that the struggle goes beyond ourselves. You don't expect the change to come today, but you must also know that when you give up and you fold your hands, then you are condemning the future generation into living in a condition that is worse than yours. And you don't want to be those ancestors that were useless, that allowed their life to be worse than the way you found it. So when you go to a place, you have the responsibility of making sure that that place is tidier and cleaner than the way it was when you came. So we need to have a little bit of selflessness and altruism in us. Unless you're an altruistic person, you cannot be an activist. So we have to abandon the idea of always chasing wealth in the short run and wanting short-term returns. Like, yes, I've been fighting for 5 years, then we are still at the same level. No. Maybe you are still at the same level, but things would have been worse if you didn't even fight at all. So whatever we have today, We have it thanks to the sacrifices of many people. We can speak our mind to some extent today because some people had to lay their lives for that, and you have to acknowledge it. And for people who give up, I call it an excuse, who give such excuse to not fight, things are not moving, it's been the same thing always, I say they are liars, because they are very bad students of history. Because when we read history, there are so many societies, so many countries that are doing great today that were not doing the same 10, 20, 50 years ago. So no, things always get better. You might not live to see it, but you can contribute to it even in your death.
Thank you very much, Farida. It was nice talking to you.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you get to any place, try to make it better. That is a key message that we got from you. Thank you for watching. We will bring you more of such discussions with actors and activists working to promote development in Africa, in West Africa, and promote social justice. Have a wonderful time.